20 Indian soldiers have been martyred at the LAC. That's the confirmation. The number, I'm afraid, is all set to rise because the injuries are grave. This is what we've been told. I want to now quickly cut across to give a larger picture on what exactly is going on even right now at the LAC. We have our news director, Rahul Kanwal, standing by, breaking this news. Rahul, 20 Indian soldiers martyred. The number could in fact even go up. Even right now, things escalating at the LAC.
So the information that we have, Preeti, just a few minutes before your show began, I've heard from the army to say that at the Galwan flashpoint, troops have currently disengaged. And I want to use some maps that we've put together with the help of open source experts to explain to your viewers what really happened, Preeti. So this is the Darbuk Daulat Beg Oldie Road. This is called the DSTBO road. It's very crucial because it allows us to have men machines sent to Daulat Beg Oldie, which is in subsector north, which is the one area of Aksai chain which India still controls. So it's very, very strategically significant given that the rest of the Aksai chain plateau was taken by the Chinese in 1962. So what happened, Preeti, is last evening from our positions on the Indian side of the line of actual control, small verification parties were sent up to the area of Patrol Point 14 to check whether the Chinese had disengaged, because in the conversations that were happening between the generals and brigadiers of the Indian and Chinese armies, they had indicated that they would pull back, which essentially means that what's India's expectation? That the Chinese would pull back to their posts. These are the two Chinese posts. They're about 56 kilometers away from the flashpoint. They have a tarred road coming a large distance, and then beyond that they have a kacha sadak or a dirt track which brought them men and machines and their vehicles in. So the army's expectation was that they'd pull back, which is what the Chinese had indicated. But when our verification party went, the Chinese were in a very violent mood, it seemed, almost seeking to provoke, seeking to get into some kind of a confrontation. Now this is what we're learning by speaking to some of the officials who heard accounts from those who were on the ground. Since it's and you come from a military background yourself, a verification party is a very small deployment. We don't know the exact numbers, very small deployment. And the Chinese were present here in big numbers and they attacked our deployment very aggressively, which is immediately when extra reinforcements were called. And you know that at this time there's a massive build-up. So from the 6th Bihar, extra deployments were sent in, and that's when on a very narrow ledge. Now imagine this as a mountain height. There's a very narrow ledge and you've got 200 soldiers on both sides having a go at each other. We gave as good as we got, and unfortunately in that some bodies were also, from what we are learning, washed away into the river. In fact, that's the concern that the Chinese had when they called early in the morning at 7:30 a.m. saying that they were apprehending, because the river Galwan actually flows into the Indian side. There's a confluence here in the Shok area. This is the confluence point of the Shok and the Galwan river. They were worried that some of their bodies had actually come towards the Indian side. So when the party went up, they found that the Chinese were there, there was violence, and this went on for several hours. So through the day, efforts were made that the Chinese actually disengage. We're being told that there were heavy fatalities on the Chinese side, but the Chinese government, and remember, you can't really expect any transparency from the Chinese government. They didn't accept that the virus was running loose in their country, that people were dying. They've been completely non-transparent about COVID numbers. You don't expect them. Usually any professional army would accept the kind of losses that happen to them. The Chinese are known for not being transparent and for lying through their teeth, and they're not telling us how many people were lost. But we are told that the fatalities are very, very severe on both sides. We also know that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is taking a very direct, moment-by-moment assessment of what's happening. He was locked in conversation with his key man, Home Minister Amit Shah, with the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, with External Affairs Minister Jaishankar. In fact, Dr. Jaishankar has been apprehensive of the Chinese motives from day one, because he dealt with them as ambassador in China, because he dealt with the Chinese when he was foreign minister. He, from the word go, was the one person in this Cabinet Committee on Security group gathering who was telling the government that you have to wait to see actual disengagement. Don't go by what they say, see what they do. And what's happened, unfortunately, Preeti, and I just want to zoom in closer to be able to show this to you, is that as we came up, the Chinese refusing to back down. At this time, though, I'm told that the Chinese and the Indian army have disengaged. Now, why is it that they want to stay, Preeti, on these mountain tops? Why is it that even though it's sub-zero temperature, 16,000 feet, which is really just a crazy place for anybody to want to be in, why is it that they want to dominate these heights? That's because of this road, the DSDBO road, which is strategically very significant. And if you're able to dominate the heights, you can take a pot shot at any vehicle that passes through on this road, which, if you remember what happened during the Kargil war, the Pakistani army was sitting on top of the mountain right above the Indian National Highway in Kargil and in Dras. So each time an Indian cavalcade or an Indian vehicle, so much so that a civilian vehicle with journalists would also pass, they take aim at it, which really makes movement very, very restricted. And therefore, whether they do it or not, they want to dominate so that they can threaten our assets. And that is what the Indians don't want. The other problem is that, okay, so you've got this road, we're trying to build extensions from the road to the patrol point, which is a totally legitimate thing to do because this is the line of actual control, Preeti. And therefore, if along the river we build a road, it's a totally legitimate thing because it's on our side of the border. Just as the Chinese have built roads on their side of the border. Here, you see this, they've got a road going all the way up to very close to patrol point 14. So what's wrong if we build a road here? The Chinese don't like that. And those are the kind of local subterranean issues which are driving this conflict. At this time, we're told though that at this point, the two armies have disengaged and pulled back finally.
You know, Rahul, I'm going to just ask you a quick question. I know you have to go to our sister concern, Aaj Tak, but a quick question there because you're keeping an eye on all the developments that are taking place. We know the Prime Minister was locked in a meeting with the Defence Minister, with the Home Minister. Now, if you put this in perspective, Rahul, this is going to be the acid test for the Prime Minister, trial by fire of sorts. We have gone ahead, we've owned Uri, we've owned Balakot. How will India react right now? And it's going to be a very tightrope walk diplomatically.
You're absolutely right, Preeti, because in some senses, with the kind of position that then Chief Minister Narendra Modi took when the UPA was in government in 2013 and not showing a resolve to act, that the problem is in Delhi, the problem's not at the border, etc., it kind of pushes him to act tough and send a strong message. Now, the problem is we're in the middle of an economic recession. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. The numbers are surging. India hasn't peaked. So this is really the worst time to get into a military conflict with a neighbor like China. However, this is not what India wanted. We've given peace and diplomacy a chance. And the thinking in the government is if this is what they want, then so be it. Remember what General Ved Prakash Malik said, who was Chief of the Army Staff during the Kargil War, the army will fight with what it has. And remember, like in this area, where if the Chinese are on top of the mountain heights, they can dominate the road. There are multiple areas along the line of actual control, especially in the Arunachal sector, in the northeast, where the Indian army dominates substantially. And we did a force assessment. You might have seen that, which is a public source, Harvard University review, which looks at the comparison between the Indian army and the Chinese army. We are more than evenly matched. So yes, we took some blows. There were some deaths on our side. There were deaths on the Chinese side as well. The Indian army and the Indian government is very clear. If this is what you want, that's what you'll get. The effort, though, is for better sense to prevail so that there is a realization in Beijing that this is not what anybody wants in the middle of a pandemic, that two nuclear-armed countries come to blows in this violent fashion. This is not a battle India wants, but if the Chinese from the government at the highest levels, top ministers have been in touch with us, top government bureaucrats have been briefing us, and they say, if push comes to shove and we need to fight, make absolutely no mistake that we will more than just give the Chinese a bloody nose. Now, it remains to be seen whether Xi Jinping, and remember, Xi Jinping is most certainly aware of what's happening. When the Chinese structure was reorganized, Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, took direct control of the PLA. So nobody else in the Communist Party's Politburo has access to what the PLA is saying. The military commanders report directly to him. And if you see all these areas, and Preeti, if you permit me, if you have a minute, I want to show your viewers what's happening in another sector. Remember, these things can't happen without one thing that happens typically is if there is a new divisional commander, maybe even a new commanding officer of a battalion, he may want to demonstrate to the enemy side that he's arrived, that he's powerful, that he's alert and he's awake, and he wants to dominate them. So he sets the tenure of his command. That happens typically between militaries. But this is much more. multiple incursions all the way from eastern Ladakh, going all the way down to Sikkim. This can't happen at a local military commander level. This is not even at the... You've got 3 commands in India. So you've got the Northern Army Command, you've got the Central Command, the Eastern Command. In China, there's only the Central Military Command in China. There's one command all across our border. There's no way even that commander, theatre commander, can take the decision. This is taken in Beijing by Xi Jinping. He fully knows what's happening, and therefore it's really his choice. If you want to poison the relationship between 2 of the most populous countries in the world, and that's the path you want to go, then that's a battle India, from what the government tells us, is ready to fight. They don't want that fight, but if it comes down to that fight, they will give as good as they get.
Hugo, to connect with you later, I just want to shift focus to our other reporters. I want to cut across to Abhishek Bhalla, who's going to, what Rahul showed you on a map right there on what the face-off looks like. We've disengaged, and that's the word which came in just about 20 minutes ago. But I want to cut across to Abhishek Bhalla, and I also have a senior executive editor, Gaurav Sawant. Now, Gaurav covered the Kargil war extensively. Many people right now, Gaurav, drawing that parallel that after Kargil, this is, if we look at militarily, the biggest face-off we've faced. I'm coming to you, Gaurav. Just give me a minute. Cutting across to Abhishek Bhalla. Abhishek, put this in perspective for us. What are you picking up from the Indian Army? What happened last night was Indian forces dramatically outnumbered by China, a ratio which was 3:1. Having said that, there is word coming in 43 casualties where China is concerned. Can you break it down for us, what happened last night and the casualties we face, the kind of numbers we are getting? We know we are 20, we know we possibly would be rising more in terms of, because the injuries are grave.
Preeti, the numbers are definitely scary. This hasn't happened in years. This is, if one is to just look at the numbers, it would be very easy to decipher that this is a warlike situation, even though it isn't one. Having said that, as far as the disengagement is concerned, once again, Indian Army reiterating that troops have disengaged. But we've been hearing this over the last few days. The disengagement really did not happen, and that's the reason why there was this ugly clash last evening. In fact, through the day, yesterday, there were meetings between officers of the Indian and Chinese armies discussing ways to do a massive pullback, not just of the troops, but also of the armor as well as artillery that was brought in very close to the line of actual control. India was hoping that will happen. For some reason, China did not follow what was being discussed. And that's when the Indian troops were completely outnumbered. They were surprised. Nevertheless, the Indians ensured that reinforcements come in. But by the time that happened, it was quite late. Once the reinforcements were there, it was a full-blown hand-to-hand combat. And the weapons used were barbed wires, iron rods, stones. And that's quite ironic that 2 nuclear powers still choose these kind of weapons to clash in this day and age. Well, thank God for that. But since yesterday, nothing has changed. Once again, a reiteration that disengagement has happened. But after this, not just in the Galwan area, but the entire eastern Ladakh, which had been under immense military escalation for the last 40 days. Once again, that build-up continues. As far as other parts of the line of actual control are concerned, they too are on high alert.
Abhishek, continue to stay with us. We've got a keen eye on the Prime Minister's office. Till now, it's interesting and we want to put it out there. While we've had a lot of politics over all of this, we've had Rahul Gandhi tweeting. The Prime Minister has not tweeted, has not said anything till now, and understandably, because the situation is huge, which is at hand right now. And we are going to wait for a government response on that. We've had the army reacting, which has given out numbers. We've had a statement given out by the MEA, Ministry of External Affairs. But Gaurav, right now with the numbers that are coming in, I want to come to you because every expert you're speaking to right now, Abhishek just said that this seems like a warlike situation, and it's not a warlike situation. But having said that, any expert you are talking to, be it diplomacy-wise, be it militarily-wise, connects this to Kargil. And you covered Kargil. You're one of the few journalists who covered Kargil and who is covering this conflict very closely.
In Kargil, there was a shooting war between India and Pakistan. The Pakistanis had transgressed, came into our area across 150 kilometers in almost similar heights. In fact, in some areas, almost same heights, and in some even worse. And then there was a 2-month battle to push them back, where heavy artillery was used. In India's case, we also used our Air Force. Of course, not across the line of control, but on our side of the line of control, the Pakistanis did not. This is different. There is a transgression from the Chinese side. While there's a transgression from the Chinese side, there isn't a shooting war, and there hasn't been one since 1975, where the last bullet was fired, or 1967 when artillery was used. Are there mechanisms? Could this escalate? Yes, this could well escalate. Is India on top of the escalation ladder? It depends on how much does it escalate. A couple of steps up the ladder, India can of course easily dominate in the high altitude area. But should it spread to other areas, if it becomes an all-out war, then of course you'll have your Navy out, you'll have your Air Force out, you'll have all sorts of arsenal. But can either India or China afford it? At the same time, thinking that neither sides can afford conflict, can we continue to let the Chinese go on with their salami slicing, that they take area from finger 8 to finger 4 and keep moving in every other area where they're unchallenged? And today they're claiming Galwan Valley. What I've been told, the army is going to perhaps make a statement on that. Not an inch of territory will be ceded to the Chinese. India would want restoration of pre-April situation, pre-May situation is what sources are telling India today. If it means remain deployed through the winters, they will remain deployed through the winters. If it means other action, that other action will be taken, not discussed in the media. The aspect that you were talking about, the Prime Minister hasn't spoken. Has the Chinese President Xi Jinping spoken? You know, do we need to take it to that level just as yet, or see at what level do we find resolution of the situation? Or do we want to go up the escalation ladder and see conflict? So there are many issues that the country is going to grapple with. But very clearly, Preeti, it cannot be business as usual with China anymore.
Well, you know, it would be a lot of people who are watching this broadcast and who are looking at 20 of our men who have fallen in the line of duty would be saying that we need a lot more. But at this point of time, one has to exercise caution. You're dealing with a very, very strong enemy right now. Seems like the enemy with what has happened. And you have to deal with it in equal measure, but be very cautious at the same time. I just want to go back right now. You know, we are continuing to relay all the information as it's coming in. And Abhishek Bhalla is getting in more word in times, Abhishek, I believe the injured that we have are quite a few, with fatal injuries with some of them. So that count of 20, unfortunately, might be rising further. Abhishek, can you hear me? All right, we seem to have lost our line with Abhishek. Gaurav, if you heard that question, I know, you're in the Indian Army. Unfortunately, we are looking at casualties that would escalate beyond 20 right now.
They could well escalate beyond 20. The situation that we are now aware of is, while we had about 100 soldiers from our side, I'm now talking about the end game, not the initial game. By end game, we had about 100 soldiers there. The Chinese had about 500 there. A part of the ledge, we are told, gave way, and several soldiers from both sides fell into into the depth there and into the river. Or the Galwan Nala, as some seem to call it. And that's high altitude. It's extremely cold. So there are high altitude injuries. There are fall injuries. There are other injuries of the the clubs that the Chinese were using, the stones that the Chinese were using, and the barbed wires wrapped around sticks that they were using. So there are all sorts of injuries and cold injuries to deal with. So yes, there are soldiers who are hospitalized. There are some soldiers who are extremely critical. And unfortunately, 17 plus 3, the commanding officer and his close protection party, they were the first to be killed because they were right in front, and they were also the ones who were trying to contain the situation. We've also heard of casualties on the Chinese side. Let's see if China is man enough to own up their casualties, or like Pakistan hid 800 odd casualties during Kargil war and subsequently at the LAC. Will China also hide their casualties? That remains to be seen, Preeti.
All right, Gaurav, just stay with me, because there is already politics which is at play on the sidelines of it all, and understandably so, because it's open season. You've had a COVID crisis go on the sidelines. You've had this escalation along the LOC for a while, which seemed to be de-escalating is what we were told, but the kind of casualties that we've seen today. 20 of our men have fallen in the line of duty, giving up their lives in the highest tradition of the Indian Army. It's never heartening to ever hear the last post. If you've been in the forces or if you have watched our martyrs, if you hear this, you know somebody's fallen in the line of duty. We leave you with these visuals, 3 of our martyrs, and unfortunately this number is going to rise to 20.
Hi everyone, Preeti Chaudhary here. Hope you like this video. For latest news and analysis, like and subscribe to the India Today YouTube channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated. Thank you for watching.